Hey everyone, welcome to Disciple Makers. I am Jeremy and we are here so that all of us can courageously multiply followers of Jesus. And so maybe for you that seems really daunting. In fact, I have here a huge jar of jelly beans. I mean, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of jelly beans in this jar. And we played a game with youth group about a year ago and I said, count how many are in here. Try to figure out how many jelly beans are in this jar. And so you can kind of meticulously count the rows and try to figure out about how many are on there. But it's daunting, it's incredible. Our students often, many of them, were hundreds of jelly beans off. But it's interesting, if you just take a small handful of these same jelly beans and you hold them in your hand, all of a sudden you can then count very easily how many jelly beans are there. And it's like discipleship. I think this is exactly how Jesus set this up to be. That Jesus said, go into the world and make disciples of all nations. Paul tells us to be ambassadors of Christ to the world. But yet, we don't have to go out to the whole world at the same time. We don't have to, if you will, go to all the jelly beans at once. In fact, Jesus said, don't go to all of them at once. The model that he used is that he went one at a time. He went one person at a time. And that's one of the beautiful things about discipleship, is that it's one at a time. We sometimes it becomes overwhelming to think that we're going to share Jesus with the world. But the way that we actually share Jesus with the world is just like Jesus did it, one at a time. There were so many moments in Jesus' life and ministry when there were crowds around him. Everybody wanted something to do with Jesus. They wanted to be around him, they wanted to hear from him, they wanted to be a part of what was going on. And there's this story in Luke chapter 19. There's this man named Zacchaeus who wanted also to be a part of this thing that was happening around Jesus. But he had an issue, is that he was hated by his town. He was looked down upon. He was a wealthy tax collector. And tax collectors, in fact, he was the chief tax collector. And one of the things that they were known for as tax collectors is they would go in and raise fees and raise taxes and profit and become wealthy off manipulating other people and charging them more for their taxes than even the Roman government would. And so Zacchaeus was hated. He was also described as this small little man. And so here is what happened in this story. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. So there were crowds, so many crowds that Zacchaeus couldn't even get to Jesus. So he went up in this fig tree, this sycamore tree. And Jesus, it says when he came to the spot, he stopped and he looked up to Zacchaeus. He focused intently on the one in the midst of the crowds. And he didn't just say, hey, Zacchaeus, I'm Jesus, nice to meet you. He said to him, I want to stay at your house. I want to be a part of your life. I want to know you. Jesus, in the midst of the crowds, focused on the one at a time. And that's just such an encouragement for us. By the way, you can read the rest of the story there in Luke 19. It changed Zacchaeus' life forever. He came to follow Jesus. And the Bible doesn't record what continued on from Zacchaeus and the effect he had in the world, but it says that all of his family was saved. And I'm sure they then went to one, who went to one, who went to one. And you see how this works in discipleship, that we start with this one at a time, and that one then goes to share to another. And then all of a sudden, as this continues on, all of a sudden that one becomes a handful, and that handful becomes 2 handfuls. And then all of a sudden, because we go one at a time, like Jesus went one at a time, you have, like, the world starts to then be affected and changed because of Jesus and what Jesus is doing, because we started with the one. And so, disciple makers, I want to encourage you, who is your one? Who are you investing in? Who are you following Jesus with? If you're sitting there today going, man, I have a few ones, keep going, keep pouring in. And maybe it's time for you to launch them off to them to find their one. Maybe for you, you're like, I don't even know where to start. I don't know who to ask. My prayer for you is that God lays it upon your heart. Who is that one for you? And today, pray, God, who's that one? Make it clear to me. Disciple makers, let's keep going one at a time to courageously multiply followers of Christ. Let's go.